Forget that pretty movie-style Old West. Reality was a lot dirtier and more complicated than what John Wayne showed. Historians spent decades hiding the ugly side of that era. Betrayals for bounty money, towns that turned into graveyards, outlaws who died in pathetic ways. These 25 stories come straight from the archives and show what really went down in those wild years. Number 1. Sam Bass, 1878. This guy pulled off something only a few ever did, stealing $60,000 in gold from a Union Pacific train in 1877. To give you an idea, that was enough to buy an entire ranch and still have change left over. Bass became a legend in Texas, always slipping away from the rangers who were constantly on his trail. But here's the part that stings. One of his trusted men, Jim Murphy, had been working for the rangers the whole time. Murphy ratted out every move the gang made. When Bass planned to rob a bank in Round Rock, the law was already waiting. The shootout lasted minutes. Bass took 2 bullets and died 2 days later, on his 27th birthday. In the Old West, your worst enemy could be the guy sitting right next to you. Number 2. The Barbed Wire Wars. Did you know a simple piece of wire caused more deaths in Texas than a lot of famous shootouts? In the 1880s, when big ranchers started fencing off millions of acres with barbed wire, small ranchers and cowboys lost access to water and the cattle routes they'd used for decades. The response came at night. Armed groups cut fences, burned property, and ambushed anyone who tried to stop them. The conflict got so violent that the governor of Texas had to send the Rangers to restore order. The crazy thing is that this cheap wire, invented in Illinois, turned the open West into private property almost overnight, forever changing how Americans understood land. Number 3. Jefferson. Soapy Smith started his career on the streets selling bars of soap. The trick was simple. He'd show that some bars had cash wrapped inside. His partners in the crowd would win the prizes, and everyone else would rush to buy. Nobody else found anything, of course. That basic con was just the beginning. Smith worked his way up to running whole towns in Colorado and later in Alaska during the gold rush. He had judges, sheriffs, and politicians in his pocket. He set up fake offices that robbed miners coming back with fortunes. In July 1898 in Skagway, the townspeople revolted. Smith showed up armed at a confrontation and took a fatal shot. He was 38. Number 4. Between 1882 and 1892, Arizona became the stage for one of the bloodiest feuds of the Old West. The Tewksburys and the Grahams started out fighting over cattle and grazing land in Pleasant Valley. It seemed like the kind of neighbor dispute you'd see anywhere. But things escalated way too fast. Ambushes, executions, and revenge killings wiped out men on both sides, one by one. When the dust settled, almost all the adult men in both families were dead. It's estimated that between 35 and 50 people lost their lives in this conflict. The last Graham was murdered in 1892, already in town, showing that hate didn't respect boundaries. The widows and orphans were left with nothing. A war that lasted a decade and wiped out 2 entire bloodlines over land and wounded pride. Number 5. Cath Williams, the only woman to serve in the Buffalo Soldiers. In 1866, a former enslaved woman from Missouri made a choice nobody saw coming. Cath Williams enlisted in the 38th Infantry Regiment using the name William Cath. For 2 years, she marched hundreds of miles through New Mexico and Colorado, carrying heavy gear just like any other soldier. The Army back then didn't even consider that a woman could be in the ranks. Cathay used that to her advantage. But the human body has its limits. After several hospital stays for health problems, a doctor finally discovered the truth during a routine exam in 1868. The result? An immediate discharge, no honors, no pension. Years later, she still tried to get veteran benefits. The government denied everything. Number 6. The El Paso Salt War. Did you know one of the bloodiest fights in Texas happened because of salt? That's right. For generations, Mexican and indigenous families collected salt for free from the desert salt flats near El Paso. It was tradition, an earned right. Then, in 1877, a group of American businessmen decided to fence it all off and charge for the salt. The community wouldn't accept it. What came next were months of ambushes, lynchings, and shootouts that left dozens dead. Things got so bad that Washington sent federal troops to put an end to it. In the end, the businessmen got the salt flats. But the cost? Blood spilled over something we buy for pennies at the grocery store today. Number 7. Billy the Kid wasn't his real name. The guy who became an Old West legend was born William Henry McCarty. He was orphaned as a kid and scraped by on the streets of New Mexico. Here's the part people don't really talk about. Even as he racked up killings, he managed to convince whole communities he was on their side. Small farmers and poor folks saw him as an ally against the powerful. How did a guy with so much blood on his hands become a folk hero? That contradiction fueled decades of stories, books, and movies. Sheriff Pat Garrett put an end to him in 1881. Billy was only 21. But the question that sticks is, was he a criminal or just a product of the chaos of that time? Number 8. The gunfight at the OK Corral happened in October 1881 in Tombstone, Arizona. It lasted only 30 seconds. Wyatt Earp, his brothers, and Doc Holliday faced off against the Clantons and the McClorys. 3 men died right there. The official story says it was lawmen taking on outlaws. But there's a detail that changes everything. Witnesses at the time swore that some of the dead were unarmed or had their hands up when the shooting started. Wyatt himself was later charged with murder. He avoided conviction, but the doubt stuck. Was he a sheriff doing his job, or a man settling personal scores with rivals? The line between hero and killer that October day may be thinner than Hollywood wants to admit. Number 9. In 1882, after Morgan, his brother, was shot in the back in a billiard room, and Virgil was left crippled for good, Wyatt Earp gave up his sheriff's badge and put together his own revenge posse. For weeks, he and his men rode across Arizona, hunting down every guy they suspected of being involved in the ambushes. There was no court, no jury. Wyatt personally executed at least 3 men, including one who took a bullet to the forehead while drinking coffee. The territorial government even issued arrest warrants for Earp himself, who technically became an outlaw. The question nobody could answer back then: where did justice end and cold-blooded murder begin? Number 10. Laura Bullion was one of the few women who managed to operate within the Wild Bunch, Butch Cassidy's gang. While the men robbed trains and banks, she handled a crucial part of the operation, forging and cashing stolen checks. In 1901, the law finally caught up with her in St. Louis. She served time in a federal penitentiary, and when she got out, she simply vanished from the story. She worked as a seamstress in Tennessee for decades, living under another name. She died in 1961 at 85, almost forgotten. Nobody in the neighborhood knew that quiet old lady had been wanted in several states. Her headstone didn't even mention her past. A whole life of crime erased by time. Number 11. Clay Allison had a reputation for being one of the most dangerous guys in the Old West. It wasn't just talk. The man racked up dead enemies in a way that gave everyone in the area chills. They say he even cut off an opponent's head and stuck it on a post as a warning. He survived shootouts that killed men far more experienced. He made it out of ambushes that seemed impossible. The guy seemed bulletproof. Then comes the part nobody expected. In 1887, he fell off his own wagon. The wheel rolled over his neck. He died right there on the road. The gunman who terrified whole towns wasn't taken down by any rival. It was a stupid accident that ended the story. Number 12. In 1887, Ned Christy was accused of killing a federal deputy in Oklahoma. The problem? He wasn't even at the crime scene. Christy was a respected Cherokee blacksmith who served on the tribal council. When he heard about the accusation, he refused to turn himself into a system that wouldn't give a native man a fair shot. For 5 years, he held out on his own against the federal government, building a stone fortress on his property. The marshals tried to capture him several times and failed. In 1892, they brought in an improvised cannon and 40 pounds of dynamite. They blew up the entire house. Years later, another man confessed to the murder. Christy died defending his freedom from a false accusation. Number 13. Lahi Dino. This woman sat at poker tables in Texas in the 1870s and walked away with men's money in her pocket. Carlotta Tompkins, her real name, learned to play cards when she was young in Kentucky high society. When the Civil War wiped out the family fortune, she used the only talent she had. The pro-gamblers of the time couldn't understand how an elegant woman could beat them consistently. The secret wasn't basic cheating. Lottie had mastered reading facial expressions decades before it even had a name. She later got married, moved to New Mexico, and became a respected citizen. The town of Deming elected her president of charity societies. Nobody suspected her past. Number 14. Canyon Diablo was born in 1881 when the Atlantic and Pacific Railroad stopped there in Arizona. The problem? Building a bridge over the canyon would take months, so thousands of workers were stuck waiting with money in their pockets and nothing to do. Within weeks, 14 saloons opened. The town had no sheriff because none of them lasted more than a few hours on the job. The cemetery grew so fast it earned the nickname Boot Hill. When the bridge was finished in 1882, the railroad simply moved on. Within days, almost everyone left. Today, only ruins remain in the desert, a reminder that easy money and deadly boredom created one of the most violent towns of the Old West. Number 15. In 1890, a religious dance scared the U.S. government so much that it sent the army to answer with bullets. The Lakota Sioux believed this ritual would bring back the wiped-out buffalo and their dead ancestors. Washington took it as preparation for war. The result was the Wounded Knee Massacre, where soldiers opened fire on about 300 men, women, and children who were basically unarmed. Here's the detail most people don't know. The soldiers involved were awarded medals of honor for that action. Some of those medals were only revoked more than a century later, proving the official story took a long time to call it by the right name. Number 16. Quanah Parker never knew defeat in battle, but he understood the war was over. The son of a Texas woman captured as a child and a Comanche chief, he had two worlds in his blood. When the Comanches were forced to surrender in 1875, Quanah did something nobody expected. Instead of wasting away on the reservation, he became a negotiator. He'd go to Washington in a suit, sit down with politicians and cattlemen, and come back with deals that kept his people fed. White people thought they'd tamed a savage. The Comanches knew he was playing the enemy's game to survive. Quanah got rich leasing land, but he never abandoned his wives or his language. He died in 1911, still caught between two worlds. Number 17. Richard Barter got the nickname Rattlesnake Dick in the California goldfields in the 1850s. He started out honest, but ended up becoming one of the most wanted outlaws in the West. In 1856, his gang stole a fortune in gold from a pack mule near Auburn. The problem? The load was too heavy. Half of it was buried in the Sierra Nevada mountains. Dick died in a shootout in 1859 before he could reveal where he hid the rest. Ever since, generations of treasure hunters have combed those mountains. Some never came back. The gold was probably found decades ago by someone who kept quiet. But the fever lives on. There are still people who risk everything for a treasure that might be nothing more than a story. Number 18. Harvey Logan, known as Kid Curry, was considered the most dangerous member of the Wild Bunch, the gang led by Butch Cassidy. While Butch planned the robberies, Kid Curry did the dirty work. Historians estimate he killed at least 9 lawmen during his criminal career, an impressive number even by the violent standards of the Old West. In 1904, after a train robbery in Colorado, the law finally cornered him near Glenwood Springs. Wounded and with no way out, Logan made his last choice. Instead of facing trial and the gallows, he put the revolver to his own temple. For him, dying by his own hand was better than being captured. That twisted code of honor was common among outlaws of that era. Number 19. Black and Seminole warriors, the alliance the government wanted erased. Not many people know this, but during the Seminole Wars in Florida, thousands of escaped enslaved people found refuge with indigenous tribes, and they didn't just hide, they took up arms and fought side by side against the U.S. Army. Andrew Jackson was furious. Washington spent more than $40 million trying to defeat this coalition, making it one of the most expensive conflicts in American history up to that point. The so-called Black Seminoles formed entire communities, married Native people, and created a unique culture. The government didn't just want territory. It wanted to destroy the living proof that Black people and Native people could live free together. This alliance lasted for decades and haunted slaveholders in the South. Number 20. Bill Pickett changed American rodeo in a way nobody saw coming. The son of formerly enslaved people, he grew up in Texas watching ranch dogs control wild cattle. Pickett got a crazy idea: do what the dogs did. He'd jump off his horse, grab the steer by the horns, and bite the animal's lip to bring it down. It worked every time. White ranchers couldn't believe what they were seeing. In the early 1900s, this technique became bulldogging, today called steer wrestling in pro rodeos. Here's the interesting part. In the middle of the brutal segregation era, Pickett traveled all over the country performing, even in Europe. Even without being able to walk in the front door of hotels, he was the headliner of the show. Number 21. The Doolin-Dalton gang rose from the ashes of a disaster. When the Dalton brothers were gunned down in Coffeyville trying to rob two banks at the same time, Bill Doolin barely escaped and decided to form his own crew. Between 1892 and 1896, this bunch terrorized Oklahoma and Kansas, hitting banks, trains, and even government offices. But here's the detail most people don't know. Federal marshals adopted a brutal tactic called rat hunting. Instead of open shootouts, they just waited. One by one, the members were ambushed and taken out. Bill Tilghman, the most famous marshal of the time, personally tracked down several of them. Doolin himself was killed by a shotgun blast in the back in 1896, proving that in the Old West, the law didn't always play fair. Number 22. Curly Bill Brocious. The Old West had plenty of outlaws, but few caused as much trouble as this guy. Curly Bill led a cattle-rustling gang in Arizona and was known for settling things with bullets. In 1882, Wyatt Earp swore he killed him in a shootout on the bank of a river. Thing is, nobody but Wyatt ever saw the body. Witnesses gave totally different versions. Some historians believe Curly Bill escaped and lived under another name. Others say Wyatt made the whole thing up to look like a hero. What's wild is that they never found solid proof of his death. To this day, researchers argue over whether it was justice or just a convenient legend Earp created for himself. Number 23. Lost Adams Diggings. In 1864, a guy named Adams swore he'd found a canyon in New Mexico packed with gold, nuggets the size of walnuts, according to him. The problem is that after an Apache attack, he escaped alive, but completely lost his way back. He spent the rest of his days trying to find the place again, without success. Here's where the story gets dark. In the decades that followed, more than a dozen men died of thirst and exhaustion combing those mountains for that so-called Golden Canyon. Some just disappeared. To this day, nobody has found anything, but the legend keeps drawing people willing to risk everything for a treasure that may have never existed. Number 24. The Overland Trail came about as an alternative when the southern routes got too dangerous during the Civil War. The problem? This road cut through territory where native tribes were fighting to survive. Between 1862 and 1869, attacks became so frequent that the Army had to build forts along the route. Passengers paid a lot for a seat, knowing they might not make it to their destination. Stagecoach drivers earned sky-high wages for the risk. Many only lasted a few trips. The wild part is that even with all that danger, the lines never stopped running. Money talked louder than fear. Whole families got on those trips, risking everything for a better life out west. Number 25. Bodie, California, 1880s. In 1879, Bodie had 10,000 people living in a gold rush that seemed like it would never end. Saloons ran 24 hours a day, shootouts happened almost daily, and the town got a reputation as one of the most dangerous in the West. But within a few years, the gold ran out and everyone left. Just like that. What's striking is what came after. Park rangers still get letters to this day from people returning rocks, bottles, and pieces of wood they took as souvenirs. They all tell similar stories of bad luck, illness, and accidents that only stopped when they sent the objects back. Coincidence? Maybe. but it's hundreds of letters over decades.